All right, are you ready, Alyssa? Okay. Well, welcome everybody to, I think the third or fourth meeting we've had on this web online city council meeting. So appreciate everybody showing up. It looks like we have 16 people in attendance this evening. We have hopefully a fairly light agenda. Catherine, can you do roll call, please?
Willman,
Here.
Hershey,
Here.
Godus,
Here.
Cope, Cope. I think Shelley is on mute.
There
Oh,
we go.
here. Okay. Step,
Here.
Davis,
Gone.
We lost Steve.
Voorhees,
Yo.
There's Steve.
Davis,
Hold on, he's not audio yet.
There we go.
he's
Okay.
on mute, looks like.
Steve, can you unmute yourself and say you're here?
Can we count him because we can
Here. Here, finally.
All right. All right, so if Alyssa, you'll mute everybody except me. I'll say the Pledge of Allegiance on behalf of the council. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Right. Was I muted for that? No.
Yes, you're good.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for showing up, council and people in the audience. As we do every time, we're going to probably have some technical difficulties. There's going to be some hiccups with people needing to mute themselves and unmute themselves. If you are an attendee, I see a couple of people that have called in. Please press *9, and that will allow it for me to see that you're raising your hand and would like to speak on behalf of the topic in front of us. Otherwise, just if you're online, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Make sure you give your name and address. So with that, our first, well, this is a, is anybody in attendance that has anything to say for public comment outside of the things that are on the agenda? All right, seeing none, I will bring it back to, yes, Paula.
It's just a quick announcement that the library is planning.
Public comment, Mr. Mayor. This is not a time for city council comment.
Thank you for that clarification, Tony. We'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to council for council comments. Paula.
Oh, okay, sorry. Just a quick note. I heard from the library district today, they're doing an open mic poetry night next Tuesday, a virtual one, and including a presentation from the Colorado Poet Laureate. So if people want to chime in on that, they could check the library's website and see about joining that.
Thanks, Paula. Tony.
Mr. Hanlon and Mr. Willman are aware of legal procedure, and I thought the meeting Monday night got a little out of control. I would ask, and I will of course be the first one to try to do this, that in a court case, someone makes an argument, the other side gets a chance to give a rebuttal, and then there's some sort of rebuttal maybe or reply, and that's it. A judge doesn't let the parties go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And I thought there was way too much of that. I would ask Mr. Mayor, as the head of this meeting, as the person in charge of the rules, that you limit people to a comment and then maybe a follow-up question, but not this sort of back and forth. And I may be one of the worst offenders in that, so I'm going to endeavor not to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Shelley. You need to unmute yourself, Shelley.
I have a couple of comments. They are somewhat COVID-19 related. So do I want to wait and we'll put them under the topic, or should I bring, they're not specific to any of the items listed?
I think if they're just general comments, why don't you do it now?
Okay, the first one is, I'd like to thank staff, Jen and Matt, who they've worked with the chamber, I guess. They have some resources for small businesses on the economic development page of the city's website. So small businesses can go there for links to loans and things like that. I did get an inquiry today from a local small business whose apparently landlord is holding them to the full rent at this time. And I don't know, I put a question out to staff, but I just think this is somewhat despicable in the circumstances. And I don't know what resources might be out there for small businesses like our local restaurants and retail operators for release or deferment of lease payments and things like that. So I'm hoping we can look for those resources and find out if they're available. And if not, you know, we'll do our best. But just a comment on that one. I'd like to see us try to figure out a way to help businesses there. The other one has to do with something that was brought to my attention as far as what we put into place with our hotel and short-term rental ordinance. Apparently we have right now, because we're on I-70, there are still some people traveling through town, and whether they're traveling to get home to loved ones, if they were stranded, whatever the situation might be. We've had a couple of families and a few single people and others have showed up at Salvation Army or Catholic Charities, and they're either out of gas or it's late at night and they cannot find a place to stay. And some of them, you know, whether they are sick or well, we don't really know the situation, but we have some emergency type situations where there is no room at the inn, shall we say. So I'm just wondering if we can work with staff to figure out a way to deal with those, maybe through those organizations or through possibly with help with the county IMT, because this is happening all along I-70, I think within Garfield County, certainly. If we can figure out a way to, there were two solutions that were proposed. A, come up with some type of emergency accommodations at a willing hotel within town or some other place. Or B, I think it would be an and, would be if we're able to purchase gas gift cards to at least help people get on their way and keep moving if they're out of money and out of luck and can't even afford gas to keep going down the road. So I'm just putting that out there to council, and maybe we can discuss it a little later.
All right, thanks, Shelley. Charlie.
Yeah, real briefly, got to respond to Shelley's first one. The Downtown Development Authority met today. They allocated $200,000, $150,000 immediately and $50,000 in reserve. And then they, between the 150,000, they divided that between some kind of grant or rent assistance potentially, and some money to quote unquote restart the economy as we get available to do that. They appointed a subcommittee, which Councilman Davis is a member, and we're going to meet again at the DDA is the 30th to be looking at potentially giving grants to people who might be in the rent situations that Shelley mentioned. When I talk about we, I mean the DDA. So just so that is something at least one of our boards and commissions is looking at.
Thanks, Charlie. Paula. You're muted, Paula. There we
I
go.
did get a letter, and maybe other council members did too, of a hotel in town that has outdoor access to their rooms that might be a potential for this kind of resource of these emergency type of accommodations. And I can find out what that name of that person was. Maybe it was Antlers, I'm not sure. But Deborah, maybe we can work something out where there's some emergency rooms available when people come up. I think we had talked about this when we decided on restricting access to hotels. And we said there might be some one-off occasions where we'd need something.
I think council just needs to give me direction on what type of services you would like for the homeless population, and then how much money you're willing to spend on it.
And we're not talking about homeless right now. We're talking about stranded travelers, right? Just to clarify.
I think they're sometimes one and the same.
Yeah, it could be either, I guess. And I think the money, as far as the money for overnight accommodations, Debbie seemed to think there might be that available. So that wouldn't be money. It would just be actually allowing that to take place under our emergency order right now. The money for gift cards, they were estimating for the gas cards, maybe about $300 a week. So it's not a large amount at this time.
Guys, I think if we have just my personal opinion, if the majority of council wants to act on that and start directing staff to allocate sums of money towards individual stranded motorists, that's fine. But I guess I would suggest maybe we come back at our next meeting with some of these organizations with an actual ask and have them say, we could use this. Here's what we're seeing. Here's the amount we need to see. And I don't know, it feels like we're starting to get in the weeds of these things of trying to dictate within our own ordinance where we're going.
And I was just wondering, even looser than that, maybe just directing staff to go ahead and work with those organizations and the IMT for the county to work on solutions to this particular issue. So either way. I do think it's somewhat critical now. So waiting a week might, it will still be going on.
These are not people, Shelley, from here. They shouldn't be traveling. We have to take care of the people here first.
Well, I agree, but these are people who are, there's not a mandatory do not travel. And for whatever reason, they need to get from point A to point B, and
They should plan better.
I guess I would suggest, I'm somewhere between Shelley and Tony. I guess I would suggest that we direct staff to continue to work with Debbie Wild and the organizations that we currently work with, use our existing relationship with the IMT to fit it into their workflow as they normally would. But I don't want to start directing staff on individual requests. And so I guess I would more agree with Tony. Maybe not his sentiment, but yeah, I'm probably not supportive of directing staff to address this at this point. So unless we have a second or a motion to direct staff to do that, I don't want to cut off debate on it, but unless we do, let's move on to the actual agenda. Item number 4, COVID-19. The first item, RAFTA in Glenwood Springs. Councilor Hershey made a good point. I think that we have probably had very, very thorough conversations about this Monday night. I would ask that unless there is new information or a significant change in somebody's view, that we probably limit, as Tony suggested, a quick comment and then we can take a vote. We will take public comment again. I'd like to hear from Dan Blankenship if he would like to speak. I will hold him now to 3 minutes. So if that's the case, I see a couple of councilors' hands up. I'll recognize Charlie and then Shelley first. Go ahead,
Well, I
Shelley.
guess I was for lack of a better term, a swing vote on Monday night, I would make a motion if that's acceptable at this point.
Yeah, knock yourself out.
So I move to allow RAFTA service within the city of Glenwood Springs to load and unload passengers at city bus stops. Such permission may be revoked should COVID-19 numbers rise significantly and/or if RAFTA does not follow its current restrictions regarding passenger usage of RAFTA buses, which they call phase 3. It complies with the public health order 20-24, plus required all passengers entering RAFTA buses to wear face coverings upon entering the buses and while being conveyed on the buses. Such face coverings would be consistent with the city's current directive approved on Monday, April 6, 2020. And these requirements would continue until removed by the city manager in accordance with the city manager's current emergency authority or until further action by city council. And I sent a copy of that out, so you should have, without having to listen to all that, should have a copy that I sent that up before the meeting.
I'll
Second,
second the motion.
sorry.
Oh,
I'm not
sorry,
second.
Tony.
All right.
I do have a clarification question, Charlie.
Sure.
Just on the, is there some reason, is there a significant difference between allowing loading and unloading at city bus stops versus just allowing RAFTA service to continue within the city? Is there something I'm missing there?
Now, the idea is to allow the service to continue.
Okay, I guess would you be willing to amend your motion to say that? I'm just worried that there might be some little thing where it's a RAFTA stop and not a city stop where we get hung up.
Sure, so I would suggest the first sentence be amended to read, I move to allow RAFTA service to continue within the city of Glenwood Springs, period. And then it would go, such permission may be revoked.
I second the motion.
All right, it's been moved by Charlie, seconded by Shelley. In the spirit of brief comments, Shelley still has her hand up. Would you like to speak, Shelley?
I was just going to point out there was new information that came forward today at the RAFTA meeting, and Dan may speak to that, but there was one piece of data in particular that I'd like to point out, and that's what RAFTA has been monitoring traffic. I'm not sure with CDOT or how they're doing that, but at Thunder River Market, and the piece of data was that on a particular day last week, I believe it was, there were 15,600 vehicle trips going both, that's the summation of both directions on Highway 82 heading up and down the valley. And on that same day, the number of RAFTA riders, again, going both ways, was like 400 and something. So I just think that's very significant to us. If we think we're making any sizable impact on the spread of the disease by cutting off the RAFTA service, we're affecting less than 3% of the trips on Highway 82. And I just thought that was very significant data. Thanks.
Thank you, Shelley. Rick?
Well, just really quickly, I'm not going to support the motion for just a couple of reasons here. I'll just, you heard me last Monday. That was probably the best shot I'm ever going to make. But let me just say real quickly that we are trying to define what an essential worker is. We know healthcare workers can't ride the bus. I know there's 400 people, 400 souls getting back and forth. I assume that's all Glenwood residents, but it might be residents from Newcastle and Silt and other places where RAFTA is running now. But, I think that we're a little confused here. We're thinking about the economics of towns that aren't Glenwood. I'm convinced that we can support Glenwood citizens who have no alternative but to ride our bus through our social support web. And I don't think that citizens who have to ride the bus, or don't think rather, anybody shouldn't think that people who have to ride the bus right now aren't scared. They'd rather be sheltering in place. They don't have that alternative. They're essentially economic hostages, and many of them are probably too scared to speak up about the dangers and the injustice of riding a bus, no matter how clean we tell them that it is. There's one side that says, you know, I'm on their side and they should have the right to ride the bus to work. They need these jobs. And I understand that. And there's some validity there. But there's also another side that says, I'm on their side. I understand their need to work, but I also have their health foremost on my mind. They're trapped in a situation they can't control economically. And again, I think many of them are afraid. While they should do what we do, the wealthy citizens of Glenwood do, and stay home, you know, they just can't do that. So it's an inconvenience that we're talking about here for them for a short period of time. It's not a life sentence. We're not talking about shutting down RAFTA, as some people have suggested. So just let me say this just a different way then. Would you let your grandparents or your parents take the bus, or your children during a pandemic? Would any of us do that? Anybody listening in, would they do that? I don't think you would. So why would you think it's okay for anybody to ride the bus? I don't get that. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Tony.
I just would ask that Charlie consider a modification, or maybe this is more an issue for Deborah. The CDC website has insists that children under the age of 2 not wear masks. It can actually be dangerous the way that they process carbon dioxide. Also, anyone with a breathing issue should not be wearing a mask either. That can be very dangerous, although perhaps that person shouldn't be out anyway. But I think that's something that we should look at in this ordinance and also in the order that we passed on masks on Monday.
If I may, it actually did include those two things, Tony.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So
Yep.
could this include that as well then, is what I'm asking, I guess, the RAFTA thing? Thank you.
I thought it
My
was,
Tony, my motion just says whatever the city directive was, so. it
Okay,
doesn't-
thank I was just asking for clarification. Thank you.
Steve Davis. You unmute yourself. There you
Yeah, I did. Takes a minute. Give me a chance. You know, RAFTA made some concessions and I really appreciate their efforts today. I kind of was able to speed read their changes coming up, and I assume, and this is just for clarification on that motion, that motion doesn't change anything, that any direction that RAFTA is headed in already.
It does
Is that
not.
how you understand it, Charlie?
That's how I understand it. And I spoke to Mr. Blankenship and their council this afternoon to make sure that we had a clear understanding.
They've got some additional steps going into place on Monday for social distancing and having a face covering of some kind, which is actually not a mask. It could be a bandana or anything. So I'm of course, you know, my position hadn't changed. Rick and I are very closely aligned, so I won't support it either, although I do appreciate RAFTA's efforts. The reality is that I don't believe anybody should carpool in any size vehicle, whether it's a Volkswagen or a bus, period. Whether you have 40,000 cars or 100,000 cars going up and down, you know, there shouldn't be more than one person in it unless you live with these people. And that's whether it's cars or buses. So that's overall my position. I have one priority here, and that's to keep people safe and healthy and alive. And I'm afraid in Garfield County, we're just simply not taking this seriously.
Thank you very much, Steve. Charlie.
Yeah, I wanted to let kind of everyone else have a chance, but you know, I've thought about this a lot. Had a sleepless night last night. This is not easy either way, and I really respect Rick and Steve's point of view and my concerns about the safety of our citizens and the people traveling in the RAFTA buses. Monday night, I was advocating that they only allow essential workers. I think it may be fairly hard to have that enforceable. One of the things that was sent out this afternoon that's going to be published, and I think part of the signs, and Dan Blankenship could, confirm it, but is they're going to, the RAFTA is offering trips for necessary travel only, and this is one of their publications, and they define it as travel from your home to places where you need to go to do necessary tasks, errands, and activities, get food or necessary equipment and supplies, transport kids for shared parenting arrangements, or work at a critical business or governmental function. And if you're absolutely sure you need or are required by your work with critical business to do it, you probably don't need to do it if you aren't sure of that. I do not want to allow this virus to grow anymore, which is why I put the restriction of COVID virus and the incidences grow at all significantly. I would be supporting stopping any traffic in and out of town. I don't think that's possible, but certainly the RAFTA would be something we would go back to. I know it's not a popular move. I've already at least had one email in my city computer, which is here to my left, and I understand everybody's concern. This is not an easy decision, but I think it's the right decision for right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. Paula.
Unmute.
Keep it unmuted. Yeah, these are hard decisions. And I weigh my last notes from this meeting were lives lost versus essential needs. And that's the strongest point of this, but essential needs are also lives, and lives are people who have no other resources in getting places. And that's a huge concern of mine is if you are working and you need that income, and it depends on whether or not you're going to have food at the end of the week or other things happening, it's just really important to me that people have the basics that they can get to at this point in time, and RAFTA offers that. I've listened to both RAFTA meetings today and the week before. I've heard them in the same strained conversations of what's the best thing to do and how do we do this and how do we take care of people. And I'm impressed that they followed suit with us immediately and said, yes, face covering is important for anybody who rides that bus. And they were handing out face coverings to people who got on and off the bus in Glenwood once that was made active yesterday morning. It's all blurring together now. Anyways, I just want to say this is hard, but for me, it really is a matter of essential service. And I think RAFTA also would look immediately at another meeting saying, we have to change things again. And as with all of these decisions, I think there's an opportunity to again look in the future. 4 days from now, we have to change things again because of a rapid spike or another reason. I think we would sit down again and do that. But at this point in time, I really feel that this is a valuable service that people need.
All right. I will, since we're doing council comments, I guess I'll just say very briefly, I think this is something we all struggled with. I think anybody who saw our last meeting could tell that this was probably the most arduous decision and topic we have ever taken, at least on this council anyway. No one takes this lightly. I don't think that anybody feels that anybody else's opinion is invalid or is cause for them to be less of a person or have less of a heart. I really hope that after this meeting tonight, after this vote is taken, that the curve we'll find looking back has flattened and that we can just move forward and not address this topic again, other than to celebrate when RAFTA moves to phase 2 and back to phase 1 and then back to regular service. That's what I hope. Charlie, I do really appreciate your motion that included, but if conditions do change, we need to be back at this table to have that conversation. There are continuing to have more cases, another death today. So we just need to monitor it and be very on top of what's going on. So Let's, looks like we have one hand out there in the public who would like to comment. So I will call on, it's S.L. Wade at firstcommand.com. But please give your name and address for the record, and you have your 3 minutes.
Good evening, Jonathan. Can you hear me okay?
Wonderful. Thank you.
Great. So I apologize. I signed in on my work email address. My name is Sandy Wade. I do not live in Glenwood. However, I have a significant number of clients in Glenwood Springs, so I conduct business there often. My parents live in Glenwood Springs. I raised my children there for a time when my husband was employed in Glenwood. My siblings live there. My nieces and my nephews live there. And so I appreciate you giving me a few minutes to weigh in on this. I can appreciate the services that RAFTA offers. I do understand that it is critical support for some people, but the fact remains that Colorado is under a stay-at-home order. We're all dealing with the economic ramifications of that and the personal ramifications of that. So I could respect that it's not an easy decision for anybody. However, my husband is a pilot for American Airlines. We have been in the same situation of he has to go out every day. The airlines has stepped up. They're doing the, disinfecting and everything. Everybody has to have their temperature taken twice a day. When they enter an airplane, when they exit the airplane, they have to have their temperature taken. And still yet we have 100 employees that have tested positive. We have 2 flight attendants that passed away. I don't understand waiting until there's a spike to make a change. If you can make a change now that would prevent that spike. The R0 factor for COVID-19 is for every 1 person can infect 2 people. And when you're talking about a bus, that's a lot of people. That's the same R0 factor of Ebola. And so if we were talking about an Ebola outbreak, would you have the same discussion or the same thoughts and opinions on that? My friend just lost her 24-year-old healthy son on Friday to this disease. And even if you could recover, being on a ventilator is not something that anybody wants to experience. And so I think that there are some other things that they can do to step this up and to think for 1 second. And I went back and listened to the meeting in its entirety from the 6th. And so to think for 1 second that everybody out there is doing the right thing and to be counting on that, I think is completely misguided because they are not doing the right thing. And I am scared for my parents that are there in Glenwood Springs. You have an opportunity to make sure that nobody else dies. Let's not wait until somebody else dies to make a different decision. I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for listening to what I had to say.
Thank you very much, Sandy. And I'm really sorry for your friend's loss. I'm sure that affects you and everybody else. That's really troubling. Any other public? All right, seeing none. Councilor Hershey, do you have something quick to say?
Just real quick, I'm going to support this just in response to what that person said. RAFTA today, as you know, Mr. Mayor voted 8-0 to leave RAFTA open. So, if Glenwood did this, if we shut it down, like I know Rick and Steve want, it wouldn't affect it. Plus, I'm not aware that the COVID-19 virus understands where like the boundaries between Glenwood and Carbondale and Basalt and Aspen are. So I think that this is important. Also, just quickly, the Picton County Public Health issued a memorandum that actually, and this was at the RAFTA meeting, that actually this is a good thing, leaving RAFTA running, and it actually helps because of providing essential services and other things. So I'm going to support Charlie's motion. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think everybody's had a crack at it. Rick, if you have something urgent and brief. Nope. Okay. Let's call the question. Catherine?
Hope,
Yes.
Step,
Yes.
Davis,
No.
Godus,
No.
Voorhees,
You need to unmute, Rick.
No, hell no.
Hershey,
I appreciate Rick's Bill of Rights up there. Why does this always come down to me? Yes.
Willman,
Actually comes down to me, yes.
Oh, sorry.
motion passes.
Sorry, Charlie, you're right.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
All right. We have now item 4B, distancing at stores. Who wants to lead this off? I'm looking at either Counselor Davis or
Actually,
Carl Hanlon.
Why don't, sorry, why don't I give some background information to start with, and then we can go from there. I apologize, just, you know, in the sequencing of things of us collecting information, I pushed out a memo to the council probably about 4:15 tonight, kind of going through what those essential business retailers are doing currently, what their corporate is doing, sort of what they're experiencing. And just to summarize, Lowe's is trying to advise people that they're supposed to be there only for essential items, if you will. They are concerned about getting too many people in the store. They have not heard from corporate yet what too many is, but they know that they're concerned about that over this Easter weekend, and so they're working on that. I don't know if it's the manager or the assistant manager at Lowe's may be on the line to talk about this issue tonight. Walmart is, corporate came down with a 20% of store capacity, which is roughly 5 people per 1,000 square feet. I think a way to imagine that in space, obviously working in a store is different, but to imagine that in space is basically, if you think of 1,000 square feet as 20 by 50, you have a person every 10 feet in that 20-foot wide box. So you have, to give you an idea of buffering that would go with that. Obviously, when you're walking in a store, it doesn't work exactly that way, but to give you a conceptualization. And that they're probably going to implement one-way aisles, so people can't pass going back and forth. And that while they have not experienced problems with volume yet, some stores have, and so they are they're aware of it, and they are instituting the masks, face coverings starting today. Tractor Supply, which is a store I spend a lot of time in, right now they're going with a maximum of 50 people at one time. I don't know the exact square footage of that store, but I can tell you, being in it a lot, I've never seen 50 people in the store. They also are doing curbside. If you want to call, they'll bring it out to you. So that's nice. City Market is currently working at about 50% of capacity, which is roughly 162 people, and they have had to shut the store down a couple of times to meet that. That's both staff, vendors, and patrons. It's roughly a 40,000 square foot store, so they're probably just a little bit under that 5 people per 1,000 at that number. They're more at like 4. They are pretty supportive of everything that's going on, but I think they would struggle to lock it down farther than where they're at. They feel pretty comfortable with where they're at. Natural grocers really didn't have an idea of what exactly corporate wanted them to be doing, and they basically said they advise on face coverings, but the people don't seem to be particularly interested in heeding that advice, and they don't feel like there's much more they can do about it. Big John's is trying to implement a 6 feet rule for people who come into the store. They raised an interesting one regarding the age of patrons that are coming in that really need to be there. They had some kids in the store today, kind of touching everything. And that can, kids are kids, right? And then Target, the store manager wasn't there. Steve Boyd talked to these folks. They wouldn't necessarily object to an advisement or a rule restricting numbers, and they're going to start getting input, I think, from corporate as to how many people they should be, how they should be handling that. My gut would tell me is that Target and Walmart tend to kind of mirror each other sometimes. So I imagine you'll see some of those same things, one-way aisles, that kind of stuff. I do know that in other jurisdictions I work in, particularly with Target, they have limited numbers, like over in Silverthorne. I know it's possible with them from a corporate perspective. So that's kind of what's going on right now. I guess, and I think I speak for staff, that at this point, really everybody is trying to come into focus on doing the right thing at these stores, and I think are working very hard to do that. I'm not sure that I would or staff would recommend entering an order that sets a specific number right now, but provide some guidelines on it should be, if it's less than 5 per thousand or less than 4 per thousand, and give those retailers some time to work with that. I think, like I said, I think they're working hard to do the right thing now. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Or Steve Boyd, I think he is on the line. He's popped up on the screen, who spoke to those stores personally. I'm just kind of conveying the information.
Steve Boyd, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Oh, and then he ran away.
Oh,
No, you need to unmute yourself. It's the bottom left button. Okay. Never mind. I guess we got that covered. Tony, are you seeing appropriate social distancing where you're at right now?
You're muted, Tony.
It's looking good at Lowe's right now, so we're good.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
People
Thank
are
you.
wearing masks.
Good,
Okay.
good.
Where are
Appreciate
the
that.
hammers? Sorry.
No, thanks to you. Shelley.
I had a quick question for Carl. Carl, I was in, I think it was Walgreens today, the old Rite Aid, and they were actually telling people as they walked in the door, if they walked in without a mask, they said, hey, you can't come in here without a mask. You need, and everyone was nice, and they'd either put their mask on or they'd turn around and walk out. There were a couple of stores in your memo that kind of said, we can't do anything if people don't want to wear a mask. Can we require or push back on that and say, no, you cannot let people in your store if they don't have a mask on?
I mean, we try, and I think that's one where I'd like Steve to maybe address, because really the one that it popped up the most at was Natural Grocers, and then I think Big John's struggling with the people coming in and getting that compliance piece.
Right.
We can, but it's a matter of how many resources do you want to direct to that? Because then it's a question of, do we go out, do we cite the store for the violation? Do we cite the individual, and do we have the resources to do that? I mean, when you enacted this on Monday, a big part of this was trying to get the maximum compliance you could with a minimum use of resources, I think. I think, we can, but I don't know how effective it's going to be.
And I would also say, the police department is already struggling. They're getting calls. We're all getting calls about violations of everything we've done. I think they're handling it as best they can. But at the end of the day, we only have so many people.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Right. Rick.
We depend on people to be sort of self-responsible. And I don't know that we can police every bad behavior that we're going to see. Number of people who, start trotting out slogans like civil liberties and, kind of, I do what I want. But I'm wondering, in lieu of that, could we make some big signs that some of these retailers could just put up on their front door? And when, people come in and flip people off or whatever because they don't have a mask and they're not allowed in the store, just point to the sign?
We started talking today about road signage because people don't know. we can put a sign on Midland because it is our road, put it on 82. We need permission from CDOT. So I went ahead and told staff to at least ask. Yeah, I do think we can probably print signs up and, send someone around to hand them out. But
Yeah.
That might be nice with the city logo on it. It would have a little more oomph behind it.
All right, Paula.
Yeah.
Mute button, Paula.
Gonna stay unmuted. Is this consideration that we're looking at distancing at stores, are we looking for a legal route or is this more of a public relations campaign? I'm trying to get a sense of
Yeah,
what we could actually do, Carl.
Yeah, I
And
mean, we could implement an order like we have with the face coverings if you wanted to. I think what we were suggesting as a staff is that maybe that's not the right route on this particular issue, just because they are working pretty hard to come to those, to get to the right place for what works for their store, and have been very open about working with that. I think if we issued some guidance that said, the target is say 4 per 1,000 square feet, and we'll help you with that in terms of calculating the square foot of your building, or maybe a sign that says, based on the guidelines of City of Glenwood Springs, the maximum number of people is X in this store, and we will be queuing people to allow that to happen, or something like that. I mean, I think that may be the better tool here to get where we want to go, because I do think that it's the PR piece would be good, and giving them some cover that, hey, there's this big sign from the City of Glenwood Springs, just like the face coverings. This is what they're recommending, and we're following that recommendation.
All right, Tony. Mute.
Yeah, I know. Can I make a comment, Mr. Mayor? Is that okay right now?
Yes.
Here is my concern. First of all, I trust these big businesses. They certainly don't want to kill their customers, or then they don't want their employees to get sick. Walmart and Target have already done, and Kroger have done a lot. I think that's well reflected in you and Carl Hanlon's memo. My other concern is the last thing we want is people traveling, right? So I go by City Market and wait in my car because there's people waiting and I have to wait till someone come out. So I just drive to Grand Junction and go to City Market and Safeway, or I don't even have to go that far. I go to Newcastle or Rifle, or I go to the City Market or Costco or Super Walmart in Eagle, or the Super Walmart, excuse me, in Rifle. So I think the last thing we want to do is make people go somewhere else. I've heard a lot of stories, some of them anecdotal, Charlie, about people traveling to Grand Junction to go grocery shopping because it's easier and maybe the selection's better. And I think the more restrictions you put on people, especially I think as this curve flattens out and people are starting to say, okay, enough already, they're just going to travel. And that's what we don't want. Again, this virus doesn't understand the difference between the city of Glenwood and the city of Carbondale, and you can put a bunch of restrictions within our city limits, but I really don't think that addresses the statewide issue or the nationwide issue. It may make it worse. So I'm opposed to any of these restrictions. I'm going to count on the businesses to do what's right and the people of Glenwood Springs to do what's right. Thank you.
Steve. Mute.
There you go. As you can tell by the expression on my face, I'm just very happy these days. I probably brought this up. I think I'm probably the reason this is on the agenda at all tonight. I think that, there's a lot of places in this nation that have taken this very serious and they want it stopped. They don't want it to continue for the next 90 days. That being said, I recognize that I'm now sitting in Glenwood Springs with folks that just want to take a little easier look at things. And so I'm not suggesting at this point that we actually mandate occupancy loads, but I think that it would be appropriate for us to talk to these retailers like we did today. I like Shelley's idea about just printing up 8.5 by 11 signs and we can walk somebody around and stick them on the doors of these retailers. Surely these retailers want to do the right thing. In my little store in downtown Glenwood, if you held it to 4 people per 1,000 feet, you'd have 8 people in there, which is too damn many. 160 people at City Market at one time is completely out of control. I don't understand this conversation at all, but I'm okay to sit back, and I think we need to do something and at least have these conversations and get some signs that says that, by the way, we did pass this ordinance on Monday that if you go into a public space, and I don't care if that's what public space that is, not publicly owned space, it's City Market or any of these retailers, that you must wear some kind of a face covering. So that's me. Am I happy? Hell no. I think you guys are all going to suffer for it. I think people are going to get sick and die, and you're going to be fighting this battle for a long, long time before you get over it.
All right, Paula.
Steve, just for clarification, what would you want? What
Well, I'd want half that.
legal setup would you want?
You know, I think two people per 1,000. I know, and I keep talking about this, and I'll say it one more time. I know of a grocery store in a community of 14,000 people. It's the only grocery store in the community, and they limit it to 25 people, and it works just fine. And there are not long lines because everybody's figured it out. And then to say at City Market, well, we don't want long lines, so we're going to let 160 people at a time in there. That's just not safe. You know, this isn't forever. We're talking about for another, 3 weeks to get up to the end of the month. And by then we'll know hopefully who's sick and who's not, and we'll all feel a little better about the position we're in life and how to go forward from there. So. I don't know what I don't know how to get there. I think that was Paula asking me the question. We had a limit on our store. We have 2,000 square feet in downtown Glenwood. And when we were allowed to be open, we had posted on the door that we would have no more than 5 customers at a time.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. Anybody from the public like to comment on this topic? If you're calling in, *9 is the call-in way to raise your hand to be recognized. Seeing none, I will bring it back to council for a motion. All right. Since there we go.
Well, you know, it doesn't seem like it takes a motion, but just direction, and maybe they want a little more of a motion than that. But I guess I would at least make the motion to have a discussion with retailers that are still open about trying to limit the access to something reasonable. And I think we ought to go around putting signs on doors, stating with the city's logo on it, telling people that it's absolutely, against our policy to walk in that store without a mask on, or not a mask, but a face covering of some kind on. And I think we ought to just plead with the stores to make reasonable decisions about their occupancy.
So Steve, just for clarification,
Yeah.
I thought we directed staff, or we asked staff that they would consider working or putting the signs out for the face coverings.
I heard me say that, and I heard Shelley say that, but.
Oh, okay. Okay. Deborah.
Hannah's already working to design the signs.
Oh,
That's awesome.
That'll be done.
Steve, you wished it into existence.
Yeah. Man, if I was that powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, I have two hands up. I have Tony and Rick for quick comments. I'm not sure I quite understood the motion, Steve, so.
Well, I
do you
think
have
it
a
was
motion?
more,
That's
I
what
think
I'm
it was
asking.
more direction than motion, actually. I don't think staff needs a motion to do something like this. I'm not asking for an ordinance.
Okay.
Certainly, but just giving direction.
So is there anybody that would like to make a motion specific to the distancing and requirement of distancing in the stores? See none, I will move on to the next item. I see a couple hands up. Sorry. Does anybody want to make a motion? Rick?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we require any retail store in Glenwood Springs to enforce a 6-foot distance between customers. I don't think that's going to drive anybody away. Everybody I was in the store with at City Market this morning were consciously moving away. So I don't think that it's a problem, but I just think that it needs to be stated as policy for the city. In the same way that a sign that would be put up, and not an 8x10 sign for Pete's sakes, we need probably 2 feet by 3 feet that say, wear face covering when you're in this store. I think that we could leave it at that. And if we observe less than 6 feet, sometimes you're just going to have to bite the bullet here, folks. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of get along, come along, and that this isn't such a big deal. We could be back having this discussion in a week, and then a week after that. And it just seems like sort of an ineffectual way to run a town. So I'm not saying an ordinance, but I'm saying that we should put that policy out for retail stores. I think they'd be grateful for that. As I was reading through Carl's work and Steve Boyd's work, it looks like they're pretty much ready for that. And if there were signs on the doors, again, that might help them, that might give them some cover. But if we just move on and, kind of go que sera, sera, we'll be back discussing these issues. I bet you $5, all my fellow members of the council, that we'll be talking about RAFTA again, at least within a couple of weeks. So I think that we've got to put some stakes in the ground here and not back away from it because somebody may be irritated. Somebody's always irritated. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Shelley, I lowered your hand inadvertently. I meant to lower Rick's when I called on him. Would you like to speak?
I was just going to make the comment. I agree with Steve. I don't think the 6 feet is enough, because that would be even denser than the 4 per 1,000 square feet. I agree with Steve that the 162, is it, or whatever that number is too many in City Market. And but I think we only have 1 or 2 retailers in town that I can think of that actually, maybe 3, that get to those levels. So I guess I'm unsure whether right now it would be more effective for staff just to try to work with them and work with their corporate and say, just let them know these numbers are too high, or whether we feel like we need to pass an order.
Thanks, Shelley. Before I call, I just called on Tony, but Deborah, I'm going to let Deborah jump in.
But I think I need to go before Deborah, just real quick. Okay.
I think you're a very needy person, so I don't like to reward that.
Well, then let Deborah go first.
Okay, go ahead, Deborah.
I was going to say, if we can, of course, talk to businesses, how effective we will be talking to corporate. I probably, without some kind of mandate, we will not get there because corporate isn't here. So maybe we can make some strides with local stores, but if their hands are tied by corporate, I'm not going to be able to untie them. It doesn't mean I'm not willing to talk to them. It just means I can't promise you that those talks will be effective.
To follow up on that, I mean, it would appear right now that the kind of the most dense that anybody is going right now in town, that they've acknowledged just based on operations, is the 5 per 1,000 in Walmart, right? With them moving towards instituting one-way aisles and other things, I think Walmart tends to be fairly proactive. If I were going to recommend a course to the council this evening as a midpoint, perhaps, is that you pass a motion stating that, it's the city of Glenwood Springs guidance on social distancing, that retail stores should be at no more than 4 per 1,000 square feet, maintaining a strict 6-foot social distance.
Also move.
With the follow-up that if we're
I
not
get
saying that, it will become a mandate. That the next step council will take is a mandate to enforce that.
Been moved by Charlie, seconded by myself. Any other further conversation?
Just real quick.
Let's call the
just real
question.
quick. Yeah. call
Okay,
the
go ahead.
question.
Okay,
I've got
I'll call-
nothing. I
All right.
apologize.
No problem. Catherine,
Okay. Step,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Hershey,
No.
Willman,
Yes.
Godus,
yes.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, thank you very much. All right. Next item, item number 4C, carpooling in Glenwood Springs.
Sure. Let me address this one real quickly with just the geography and the resources of Glenwood Springs. Neither one of them realistically can we honestly address this issue. It's not a closed community where we can maintain, nor do we have the jurisdiction to set up a roadblock on the edge of Highway 82 or I-70. I think it's a place where we could make a strong recommendation again, but I can guarantee you that we don't have the resources to enforce any kind of a carpooling restriction. I know that Steve has talked about stopping cars in the community that he's in right now. We just don't have those kinds of resources, to be honest. And in terms of prioritization, with a small police force that is running lean anyway, trying to respond to the most serious issues. So there again, if I could make a recommendation, it would be that we would strongly recommend against carpooling by members, by anybody who's not in the same household, to job sites in Glenwood Springs. But outside of that, I think it's very difficult for us to take it any farther. And I don't know if Deborah wants to follow up on the resource issue or if I covered it okay.
I think you covered it pretty well.
Counselor Davis. You need to unmute yourself.
I'm working on it. Carl, I agree. There's no way Glenwood could enforce such a thing. I think it is really important. And in Glenwood, we have said to contractors working on outdoor projects, Heil and Gould and such, that they're not allowed to carpool to and from their job sites or while they're working. And I hope that as a city, we're doing the same thing. I hate to look around and see city trucks that have 2 or 3 people sitting in the front of a pickup truck together. I think we need to lead by example. And I think, I would just like to make a strong recommendation that people not carpool with people that they do not reside with. It goes directly against the governor's order of social distancing. There's no way you can keep your social distance inside of an automobile of any kind. So there I am.
Thank you.
Do I want to pull over every car? You damn right I do. But it's just because I want people to be healthy and live through this. And I want to get an end to it.
Thanks, Steve. Tony.
I'll say it again. I talked to a doctor today. I talked to Miss Kaloya today, whose husband is a doctor. Valley View Hospital is a ghost town. There were 2 patients who were positive. One was discharged. One was just taken off a ventilator. We have had 2 deaths in Garfield County. I understand this could spike. As long as we keep up with the social distancing, I think it will help. I'm glad the president was wrong. We didn't have 200,000 deaths yet. We're at the countries at less than 20,000, less than 18,000, which is 0.001% of the entire United States. So, or actually less than that, 0.0048%. So I appreciate it. I don't like being lectured by people who are not here and don't understand the situation on the ground, but people need to carpool. People need to get to work. People need to do the smart thing too, to keep themselves alive. But I'm not going to be lectured and told like that I'm trying to kill people because I disagree, which is not true. Every single person on this council, Mr. Mayor, and I'm going to say it again, cares about the public and wants people to be safe. So I'm getting a little sick of being lectured by others in this council that I don't care, or that if I make a bad decision, people are going to die, because that is not true. I think the curve is flattened. If I'm wrong, you know, you can all call me on it. We will see. But this legislation in a tiny little town, which frankly is just a small, tiny little part of Colorado, that's even a smaller part of the United States, that's even an insignificant part of the entire world, is not by itself going to end the COVID virus. What's going to end it is a vaccine, hopefully testing that is widespread so people can go back to work, which is what they need to do and want to do. People
Tony,
don't want to be
Are
in their
these
houses.
comments?
I am not done yet, Mr. Mayor, please. Which is what people want to do. So these restrictions are nice and there's little tempest in a teapot, but even Aspen hasn't required masks for everyone. So I think we need to just be a little more realistic and respond appropriately. I have a motion to make at the end of this meeting, Mr. Mayor, so I would like to reserve some time for that. Thank you.
Thank you. I see 3 other hands up. I'm going to ask that thy fellow councilors refrain from continuing to pontificate about what COVID-19 might be, might not be. We're all sitting here. We're all well aware of what this can do, what this is doing. The death that happened today, our second death. Charlie and Rick, I see your hands up, but I'm really going to ask that unless you have a specific comment about carpooling in Glenwood Springs, that you reserve your comments for the next item. And please, and I'm not picking on you guys, your just hands are up, sorry. But please, let's keep it to away from pontificating and to the agenda item that's announced. So, Deborah, thank you.
I was just going to let you guys know that, you know, city staff is not carpooling when they're working. We made sure they're all should be driving in separate vehicles because Steve raised that concern. That's all I got.
That took a while. Charlie.
I move that we adopt a city policy, not a directive. The carpooling among non-household members is strongly discouraged.
Second.
Moved by Charlie, seconded by Rick. Further conversation, Paula.
Just to remind me, Carl, do we have a policy in place that we have told people that they cannot carpool within a work environment?
Only on as part of our COVID-19 plans for city-run projects, that has been a condition of those.
City-run.
So for city projects, and also then the policy with city employees is no carpooling unless you're out of the same household.
But we have nothing
Those,
for.
those are both done in our kind of proprietary capacities, right? One is as the employer saying we don't want anybody carpooling. The other one is the owner of these projects, like Cedar Crest and Two Rivers, that and the water line project that's going on. That's part of the COVID-19 plans that we as the owner are requiring.
And we do not have a policy in place for, say, independent contractor doing construction that he cannot carpool, or somebody, any other business.
Somebody's doing a roofing project, we don't have anything as a permit condition to that roofing project, or something going on like that. And I know that's going to be a little bit of what we're going to talk about on the next item, but there again, it comes down to an enforceability issue, I think, realistically.
So Charlie, my question to you is this a motion that you made not just to carpooling to work, but also requesting people not carpool within a work environment?
Anywhere.
Okay, thank you.
within the city limits.
All right, Shelley.
Does this, and Carl, maybe you know, is this covered under the governor's statewide order? Or
It is. It would be a reinforcement of the statewide order and recommendations. It's actually goes back to I think Public Health Order 2022. That was the one that really provided the most guidance on social distancing. So this would be one of those issues that it had addressed as well. I do think there is value in highlighting it at a local level.
Okay. Okay, I'm a little bit loath to start doing a guidance from the city that just repeats everything that's already out there on the state level.
Yeah, I mean, it could go either way. I think it's an education piece.
All right, Catherine, let's call the question.
Hershey,
No.
Willman,
Yes,
Otis,
No.
Cope,
No,
Step,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Voorhees.
Yes.
So gay.
Motion passes.
All right. Last item, non-essential interior construction, item 4D.
All right. We can, I think, hopefully Jen is on the line. I don't know if you can see or not. So honestly, our building department has been doing a really good job on the permit side of managing non-essential construction. The issue that I think Steve brought this one up as well. And when you think about it, there are a lot of construction projects that occur on the interior of a home or in a closed environment that don't necessarily trigger pulling a permit, so that we wouldn't have anything to do with it. Painting is a great example. If somebody's going to come in and an independent painter is coming in to paint your house, those kinds of things. There again, I have no idea how we would enforce that. But it is a very valuable thing that people shouldn't be doing, right? You shouldn't be bringing people from the outside world into your home to paint it, to do minor repairs, change out the faucet that doesn't necessarily need to be changed. You're just changing it because it's a good time to do a home improvement project, those kinds of things. I see Jen is on, and I'm going to turn it over to her to kind of talk through what we're doing with the building department right now, but then also their thoughts on these non-permitted minor construction, interior construction things that we would see going on. So hopefully, there we go.
Good evening, guys. I would say that we have been focusing primarily on residential projects and essential projects. So, if somebody has a roof and they have an issue and they need to address it, we want to make sure that if it rains, that that roof is safe. So those are the types of things that we've been focusing on. There are a few projects that are of larger scale, and we have our building official has gotten similar plans, safety job site work plans as we have on the city projects. I think I spoke with the building official, it was either yesterday or the day before, and he said that he thought, that it seemed like Glenwood Springs was quieter when he came in, that people were not out and about doing, painting kind of projects, just from his going to a few inspections throughout town. But, my guess is that anecdotally that there are people, and some of that's supported by the information that Steve got from Big John, from the Ace Hardware, that there are people who are doing home improvement projects at their own homes. And, if they have a neighbor or somebody who comes over and helps them briefly, I think that is probably happening. So, I think you could have a recommendation again, kind of that those types of projects not happen. But I think we have been really focusing on essential and those residential projects that need to be finished up. You can certainly strengthen that, and we could, issue essentially kind of a stop work order for everything. If you want to do that, other than I would say the exception of, if somebody has a water heater, those are essential kind of projects. If somebody's water heaters goes out, I think we would like to have those be inspected. Victor is doing photo or video inspections where he can. So in the case of a water heater, he could potentially look at a picture or a video and see if he had concerns, and then could go do an inspection. And I think that's kind of where he is leaning in those cases where he can.
All right. Thank you, Jen. Comments from council, or I guess questions from staff first. All right. Seeing none, I'll open up do this, I guess, the correct way. We'll open it up to public comment. All right. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion. Steve, you have to unmute yourself.
I recognize we can't, control what people do inside their homes, and I don't suggest that we do that. I think it's a good conversation. I would strongly encourage people not to have outside people that do not reside in their home at this point in time, that we're at a stay-at-home order, to have other people come into their house and do projects. The only thing I was really thinking that we as a city should consider is really not issuing new permits during this time period for major interior remodel work. It doesn't make sense to bring a construction crew in to tear out your kitchen while your entire family's on quarantine, and bring who knows what and touching all your surfaces at the same time. We're talking about for the next 3 weeks. I have no idea if the building department is seeing those kinds of applications or not, but I would certainly be very hesitant to issue a permit for that kind of interior remodel construction until this order is lifted. That's a comment, I guess, not a motion.
Yeah, Steve, I also share that struggle. I know I heard from Councilor Hershey the other day that he has a neighbor who has they saw them carrying in carpet and paint, and they're doing whether any of it's permitted or needs to be permitted, I don't know, but it obviously violates the spirit of the stay-at-home ordinance. And I saw Crystal Property Management bringing in house cleaners to a residence, and technically that fits under the maintenance item, I guess. But it doesn't fit within the spirit of what we're trying to do here. So I don't know about the legislation side of it, but I also agree that you should not have your your every other week housekeeper coming in. You should not have the drywall guy in, because now you can get some pretty cheap prices, because all construction in Pitkin County is halted. I think people are using this as an opportunity to get some projects done. And I think if there is people at Lowe's, it's because of that. So I did not hear a motion, unless Councilor Voorhees would like to bring one. We can move on, but go ahead, Councilor Voorhees.
Yeah, I would make a motion that we do not permit any interior renovations during the quarantine period. I don't know that we can do anything about housekeeping or people doing their own work inside their house, but if they're pulling a permit, I think the least that we could do is say not during the quarantine period.
Deborah?
I would just say, make sure if this motion passes that there's something for emergency permits, because, if something goes wrong with house and it's a health and safety issue.
Yes, absolutely. I would amend that motion to say to prohibit all non-essential home remodels with the exception of an emergency, plumbing, electrical, that sort of thing.
Councilor Davis.
Second.
Could I ask for a clarification?
Of course.
Yes.
So you said non-essential home remodels, would that extend to house demolitions?
Well, I think anytime you bring somebody who's not a member of your immediate family into your home to do domestic work, so if they're there to do demolition, yes.
Further conversation, Charlie?
More of a question, Rick, are you saying that they can't apply or the permits can't be issued? Because if they want to apply when the staff has time, that's fine. They just can't issue it.
Yeah, I think that you could have sort of a hiatus start date, but I think that they could apply, absolutely. It's just, it'd be put on hold until such time that we lift the quarantine order.
The actual issues of the permit.
And Rick, just for clarification, and Shelley, I see your hand, but I just would like a little clarification. Your motion is not tied to the permitting process through the city. It is anyone who's not of your household. It is any construction, domestic construction on the interior of a home, regardless of permit status, will no longer be allowed. Is that correct?
Well, that's what I would favor. I was using the permit process to kind of get at this because that's what we know. But yes, if we want to extend that and say any interior renovations, or, we could even say maybe, well, no, I guess I would just leave it at that and see if I got a second.
Councilor Davis, you did have his second. Would you, the clarification you'd agree with?
Well, just a further clarification, I guess it's by a third party. I mean, if I'm working inside my house, that's probably okay. But what we're talking about is having a contractor and a crew come inside your house while this quarantine period's going on. And I understand people have to have a water heater changed or something, but I don't have to tear out my kitchen or add on a bedroom.
Thanks, Steve. Shelley?
Is there a date on this?
My understanding was that it was to the end of the stay-at-home order.
So, okay, so April 26th. Right
26th.
now. Anyway.
Right now, right, but it could be extended.
Further
Okay.
clarification, Rick, would you be amenable to, and I guess Steve as well, you can just do a nod to having this effective no earlier than Tuesday, so that if there are like holes in the floor that whomever can get a few things buttoned up, as well as give staff an opportunity to actually draft something and get it rolled out a little bit with a little bit of fanfare. Would you be amenable to that?
Yeah, I
Councilor
think that's fair.
Steve? I'll take that as a yes.
Okay.
Paul?
Can I also clarify though? So we're only
Sure.
talking about permits here. We're not telling people they can't do work in their house. I'm just concerned about going overboard with regulating what people can do in their homes.
Can
I
I
think we're talking
change a
about-
light bulb, Shelley? Is that allowed? Or is the name?
I think we're talking about third-party people coming into the house, not just permits.
But they can get a permit but we're not prohibiting having a contractor come into your house, because I don't know how we would police that. But I thought the motion was that we're not issuing permits for non-essential home remodels.
Yeah, I think that's true. And then we extended it to say that any inside contractor who comes into your house shouldn't be allowed during the quarantine period.
How does that get enforced?
Well, how does any of this stuff get enforced?
And that,
I mean, it's people who have goodwill, responsibility to the neighbors, people who aren't minimizing this virus as something that's, so negligible that we shouldn't do anything.
Yeah, I just think there are some things we can regulate and some things we can't. We can't completely regulate stupid. So we can't regulate every stupid thing that somebody might try to do.
Right.
But if people can't get a permit, let's say they're going to do their own work in their house, does that mean they can't get a permit for that?
Well, I think if they, were working with people who lived under that roof, that wouldn't be a problem. But I think bringing in people who aren't part of that immediate domicile,
So our building department is going to have to be able to distinguish.
Well, but maybe what we could do is just deputize members of the council to kind of patrol the neighbor. I'm being facetious here.
Well, we do have code enforcement. We do have a code enforcement program and we,
I appreciate the intent, but I don't think I can support this.
okay. Paula and then Steve.
Similar to Shelley, I'm having a hard time on figuring out what exactly the motion is. It's been changed a couple times, and I'd like to get some insight from Carl on the legality of this when we're talking about regulating inside people's homes.
But I don't think I accuse somebody of being a coward.
Can we get back to raising our hands, please?
So let me see if I can answer Paula's question. Certainly, we have a mechanism to filter kind of the types of permits that we issue, not necessarily the ones that we accept and process, but the ones that we issue. And I think that's, in all honesty, kind of what we've been doing is trying to focus on those residential projects that are doing essential repairs, right? You got to fix the hole in your roof. You've got to change your hot water heater because it needs replaced, or your boiler, right? Those are critical items. Talking about how we might be able to, I think you have the police power to reach that far. Does it make any sense or not? I guess I have to tell you, frankly, I don't think it does, because we won't be walking neighborhoods and patrolling that. And you're talking about a very small percentage. I mean, you're starting to get down to a very granular level of how many people are you impacting, right? We don't have a ton of that going on right now. So I think to try to regulate non-permitted interior construction by third parties is extraordinarily difficult, pragmatically. But I think that's what the gist of the motion, if I understood it, was that there should be no unnecessary interior construction during the period of the shelter or the stay-at-home order up to April 26th. And further, there should be no non-permitted interior construction by third parties during that same time period. Did I sum that up pretty well, Rick?
You did.
I think you can make that motion. We will endeavor to make that happen, but we have no real way other than on the permit side to enforce it.
Okay. Yeah, and that's fair enough.
Steve, you have something quick to say and then we'll call the vote.
My only quick thing is, certainly in my mind, it was the building official is sitting there with a application in his hand that is not from the homeowner. It's from a contractor to go into a home to do a remodel project. I would suspend that until April 26th. That's a very simple thing to do. If he doesn't, in fact, and the reality of it is, here we are is today the 8th. The building department would never get an application process that quickly anyway.
Paula.
So is this a guideline or is it an actual resolution of some sort? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
I believe, if I may, Councilor Voorhees, that this is a law. This will be a order, public health order that prohibits third parties. And I think Councilor Davis, from what I heard from the original motion, that if we prohibit third parties from coming in, that would encompass the contractor from applying for a permit. I think that would cover your concern as well. Is that a fair assessment, Councilor Voorhees?
Yes, I think so. We need to be sure that we address the idea if it's an emergency repair that we'll permit that regardless.
Okay. Charlie.
I don't support this. I trust staff to make good decisions here, and I don't support this.
Great. Catherine, let's call the question.
Voorhees,
Yes.
Davis,
Yes.
Stepp,
No.
Coe,
No.
Godus,
Yes.
Hershey,
No.
Willman,
No.
Motion failed.
Okay, it looks like that is the last item on the agenda. Councilor
have one more
Hershey
thing.
did, yes, go ahead, Councilor Hershey.
I would make a motion to end this procedure of having a meeting every Thursday. I think these are becoming duplicative. Of course, if we have to have a meeting, we could notice it on a Tuesday. Certainly, we should still have our meetings on the first or third Thursdays, which would include next week, I believe, if I count my Thursdays. But I don't, April has 5 Thursdays. I think these are becoming, until the situation on the ground is more clear for everyone, I just don't think it's necessary. So I would make that motion that probably nobody's going to second, but I just think that they're becoming duplicative and unnecessary.
Tony, could I,
I second the motion.
okay, I guess I would just jump in and say that we probably don't have to take this vote. And we can take this vote, but we probably
I
don't
want
have
to vote. That's why I made a motion.
I understand, but like next week we have a regularly scheduled meeting. So next week we will have the regularly scheduled meeting.
And I said that.
Okay. But we will not have the meeting, a scheduled meeting on the 23rd. Is that correct?
I don't want meetings every Thursday like we were talking about. That's what I'm saying. I've made a motion. It's been seconded, and I'd ask that the question be called.
Let's call the question. Catherine?
Godus,
Yes.
Coe,
Yes.
Step,
No.
Voorhees,
No.
Hershey,
Yes.
Willman,
No.
Davis,
No.
4-3 votes, a lot of those tonight.
Yep.
This is a divided council.
motion failed.
Well, and the
All right.
group is ever changing what the 4-3 is. That's the most entertaining part.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I think our business here is concluded this evening. Really appreciate all the conversation. We will.
I have an 8-minute speech though, Jonathan, to give. I'm sorry. I'm just kidding.
Tomorrow, we're going to have a community webinar as well at 11 o'clock, where we're going to speak with I believe, the Vice President of the Denver Federal Reserve. So if you're able to tune into that community and/or council, that'd be wonderful. Otherwise, for the good of order, meeting adjourned.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
You.
I can't get out.